All right, Tom, you've already, obviously you're already doing what you're doing, but was there a moment when you realised that, I know you've been modest in the first part, but was there a moment you sort of realised that you had a talent either, in this sphere for buying, selling, spotting a good one? Was there like a catalyst moment?
No, I don't think that was. I don't think that's what kicked in at any stage to start with. I'd say I must have been doing it from 2008 to about 2013 or 14. Just head down, just getting it right, getting it wrong, getting it right. I'm not, as much as a lot of people who know me say I never shut up, I talk. I'm my biggest critic, I'm my own biggest critic, because the one thing about this game is you can't big yourself up too much, because there's someone there to knock you straight away, and you can buy a good one, but you can buy a bad one next time. So where do you start and stop? But I just kept my head down, and of course I started buying a few horses, and I suppose the big kick was getting a horse into Paul Nicholls. That probably changed. That probably changed it. I had to up the ante, and I had to be very good at what I do to be able to keep horses coming into his yard that deserve to be in there.
I mean, when you started, it's a big responsibility. Somebody's got to trust you. No offence, but you had 70 winners. You've done some point-to-point commentary and stuff like that. And they've got to give you their money. They've got to trust you to spot a horse, because if you spot a bad one, they've done their money.
And I have done.
So how did you manage to persuade people early days? Did you
No, I can talk to people, and I knew them. From being a jockey, I knew them, so I wasn't cold. It wasn't like they didn't know me at all. I worked for Pond House. I knew Paul Nicholls. I knew Philip Hobbs. I had a bit of a grasp on it, and I loved buying cheap horses, because I grew up at Pond House, where cheap horse, win a race, get it done, let's do it. And I used to keep buying them, and just by hook or by crook, we got it done, and they started to win races at a very modest level. But like, we started off, I think the first year I had 37 odd winners or something, and I was delighted with that. But we were getting up for 300 winners up on about 3 or 4 years ago. Do you know what I mean? And that's how big the business has gone. And I suppose my average spend on a horse from the start was about 14 grand. It's nearly 80 grand now. And I would buy 150 horses a year. So it's a massive business now. Do you know what I mean? And it's success that gets you there, but also less mistakes. And that's what keeps it rolling. We're all going to buy bad horses. You can't get away from that. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but I tick boxes with horses. I have a certain criteria and a routine I go through, and over the 10 years I've heightened it. It's squeezed it and got it to a point where when you're spending money at the top end, it's actually easier, because you can make better decisions, because the potential is he's a good horse, right? They don't all be good horses, of course, but the middle market's the hardest, because you're expecting him to do better, whereas at the top end, he's already there in the industry's eyes. So it's just getting to that point where you can buy him.
Okay, now you said that you sourced 37 winners in your first season.
Yeah.
I would imagine that's pretty good.
I was delighted, yeah. I thought it was brilliant.
You said you've learned from Mr. Pipe, he was getting cheap horses. So what sort of horses were you buying then?
Rubbish. Cheap horses that win races. But you could win races back then. The industry has changed so much that, when I was at Pipes to start with, he used to be able to buy a horse and it'd win 3 or 4 novice hurdles, 2 handicaps. They've stopped you from doing that. You can't win more than 2 races with a horse now. And it's kind of defeated the purpose of buying a cheaper horse. There's still an avenue you can do it, but there's no prolific winners anymore, is there? Very few. There's very few horses you see that has won 6 on the bounce anymore. Very few, because the industry is dead set against them doing it, which I think is a shame. I think we need winners. We need a horse to look like a horse, and one that's capable of keeping winning without trying to stop him.
And back in those days, I mean, everybody knew that Martin Pipe was a better trainer than most other trainers. Yeah. So you could buy a horse that had potential, send it to Mr. Pipe, and then you could expect. So when you were buying these ones, were you buying them for trainers that you knew had ability, or was it for owners that were going to have to send them to a good trainer?
Every horse I bought at the start was for the trainer. I didn't know an owner. I didn't know any owners. I mean, I knew David Johnson and whatnot, and actually my first ever Cheltenham Festival winner was for David Johnson and Andy Stewart, Salubrious. He won the Martin Pipe conditional jockeys race. He was the first good horse I bought. the first nice horse that got to the next level, you know, capable of being a 140 horse. And yeah, that was a big achievement, and it was with someone who'd looked after me in the 10 years previous as a jockey. So that was a very special moment, being able to be a part of a winner with David Johnson and then Andy Stewart.
Now, you mentioned that you bought your first winner from an Irish pointer-pointer.
Yeah.
I mean, we hear a lot about horses being sourced from Irish pointer-pointers,
Yeah.
got on to be very top class. Do you spend a lot of time in Ireland looking for potential purchases now? Have you got spotters over there? Or?
98% of the time, I won't buy a horse without seeing it, because it's my eyes, and I can't tell an owner, you must buy this horse if I haven't seen it. I just can't. Or at least at worst, I have extremely great footage seen by someone I trust as well. I have two people that I use in France. I've one I use in Germany. But the Irish stuff, I have Jimmy Kelly. Jimmy Kelly in Ireland helps me out a lot. When I can't get over quickly, he'll get in the car and go and see a horse if I really need it. But this week alone, I was in Ireland for 3 days. I've seen 240 pointer-pointers that are ready to run in the next 3 months. By the end of my trips to Ireland, I will have seen 400 pointer-pointers that will run over the next 6 months. So I've already have a picture, I have notes on every single one of them. So on the Sunday afternoon, the decks come through an hour before the race. Let's say there's 10 runners. I will have seen definitely 5 or 6 of them. I can size that race up. There's a maiden on Sunday here now. There's 34 entries. I've seen 23 of them. So of the 34 entries, I've already seen 23 of them. You know, so I already in my head know how that race is going to go.
So would you guys all get your cards marked, this is the potential superstar and you better see it, that sort of thing?
I don't think too many do it like I do. I don't want to think about if that horse is a good horse after he wins. I want to know before he wins. I want to know I've seen him. When I get rocking and rolling on a Sunday evening and spending large 6-figure sums, I want to know this is the one. Because if you have to think about it, you will never be confident. I don't need to be. On Sunday afternoon, no one's more confident than I am. I'm getting it bought if it's the one I think it should be.
Okay, so why do, for us laymen, I mean, it's probably a simple question for you, but why do horses running in Irish points reach such huge figures compared to the UK counterparts?
Well, in the last 20 years, well, no, not even 20 years, probably 12, 15 years, the quality of animal running on a Sunday is far superior than the 30 years beforehand. You have between 30, 40 to 70, 80 grand stores running, and you have 7 or 8 of them running against each other. So you have 7 or 8 top quality animals taking each other on a Sunday, trained to perfection because it's a business. The chances are that's going to be the best horse. The industry in England is wrong. It shouldn't allow a 6-year-old near a 4-year-old. If you allow it, if a 6-year-old has ran 9 times, in the grand scheme of things, he might be moderate because he's still a maiden, but he's a handicapper. You're not teaching a 4-year-old to race. That 6-year-old, jump off, it'll go a gallop because it knows its job. The 4-year-old's trying to go with him. Now, if the 4-year-old doesn't beat him, getting 21 pounds off him, he's useless. But that's unfair. He shouldn't be running against him. The Irish 4-year-olds run against 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds run against 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds run against 6-year-olds. In England, 4-, 5- and 6-year-old maidens. Waste of time. Absolute waste of time. It's the wrong thing. Now, you have to do it at times. I done it last Sunday. I've done it, and it's worked out. But I don't think it's for the better of the industry. You don't have enough of the same quality of animal taking each other on the one Sunday, because you'll have 4 meetings on over here, and maybe they'll all avoid each other and they'll all go off somewhere else. Whereas in Ireland, they can't really avoid it. They maybe can the odd time, but more often than not, they can't avoid each other.
We're seeing the success that they've had in Ireland doing it that way. Why do you think it is that the UK point people don't follow on?
You tell me. It should be fairly plain to see. The powers that be aren't willing to change it, or don't want to change it, or are being ignorant towards not changing it. It's very, very simple. If you have one 4-year-old maiden on a Sunday in England, they all have to run against each other, and then they can run a business from it. But don't, the thing about in England, why can't the English make as much money as the Irish? I stood in a field in Ireland one day, was a 6-runner 4-year-old maiden, and I was there to buy a horse called Danny Kerwin's brother. I bought Danny Kerwin, he was at Nichols, and I wanted to buy his brother. His trainer told me he's a good horse. I went there. The 6 of them turned out of the back straight, 2.5 mile maiden together. There was about 3 lengths, and 2 horses just took off as they turned for home and 2 to jump. Appreciated and unviolent. So in a 6-runner race in Ireland, there was 2 Cheltenham Festival winners. One of them a multiple Cheltenham Festival winner. I can't name the last Cheltenham Festival winner that ran in an English point-to-point that's been trained in England still. And Nerganim was probably the last one I can remember, and he went to William Mullins. He's a champion chaser. But I can't remember enough of them, whereas it's happening 10, 15 times a year in Ireland.
Is it not a risky sort of business for vendors having our horses sort of running around a field ridden by amateurs, that could be worth 100 grand? Or is it just got to be done?
They're not ridden by amateurs, are they? Derek O'Connor's not an amateur, is he? Jamie Codd's not an amateur. Barry O'Neill's not an amateur. They're masquerading as amateurs. They're as good as any professional rider. And they're riding, the only things they ever ride are maidens. That's a scary thought, isn't it? Do you know, well, Barry O'Neill rode on violin that day. He's rode Sam Crow, he's rode some of the best, so is Derek and Jamie. So they're not amateurs in as such, do you know what I mean? Whereas in England, it is run as an amateur sport. And maybe that's why they're reluctant to change it. Maybe they want to keep that amateur feel to it, which is fine. If that's what they want, that's great. But don't then get annoyed that the Irish are making all the money having a system for selling. It's run as a business in Ireland. It's run as an amateur sport in England.
Now, it's interesting. Hopefully I've got my facts right here, because One for Arthur won its maiden on its 5th attempt.
Yeah.
Then after you purchased him, went on to win the Grand National in 2017. I mean, what did you see in him, assuming you didn't think, there's the Grand National?
No, of course I didn't. But again, I ticked the boxes. He was by a good stallion, Milan. He'd shown consistent form. He'd been placed every run and got better with each run, and he won on his 5th start. He was coming from a trainer that they very rarely win first time out. So with all of that aside, and we had an order to fill that was, I don't know, we might have had 70 or 80 grand to spend on him, and he cost 60 grand. And it just ticked a lovely box. We were going to have a nice staying chaser. It's exactly what he turned out to be, a very good staying chaser, because he was very well handicapped and very well produced by Scoo and Lucinda, because he ended up that season very well handicapped and strong, and the strength of stamina got stuck in. It was just one of them years. He went and won the Classic at Warwick before he went on to win the Grand National. So everything fell right that year. Derek Fox gave him an amazing ride.
Okay, now you've widened your scope a bit, because you've had a Royal Ascot winner.
Yeah.
Now the flat is where the potential massive money is for an owner. I mean, are you going more that way, and do you retain an interest of any of those horses that might go on to make fortunes breeding, etc.?
No. And I'm not going that way, because I got to a point where I was spreading myself too thin, and I had to concentrate. I was trying to do all the flat sales and all the national hunts, and it was nearly physically impossible to do all the Ireland trips then as well. I was just never at home. I might as well have just had a caravan. Do you know what I mean? So I'm not around enough flat people to make it worthwhile. I like buying a few flat horses. I probably buy 10, 12 flat horses a year, but my main business, 95% of my business is all national hunt.